Hello everyone, welcome to LUKMAAN IAS. Today we are going to have the Hindu analysis of 25th and 26th April 2021 together. So let us try to understand what are the developments in last 2 days. Yes, we have segregated them for mains purpose and for prelims purpose. Along with that, as we know that the country is facing COVID-19 pandemic second wave. So many such decisions are being taken by the government. So COVID-19 related developments, including some judicial pronouncement rulings regarding dealing with COVID-19 pandemic in the country, and at the same time international help to deal with COVID-19 pandemic in India. In last 2 days, many countries have come up to help India in dealing with COVID-19. So as a follow-up to COVID-19, in the end, we are going to look into these developments also. So let us take a first overview of all these articles. A green partnership. So we know that recently there was virtual leaders summit on climate hosted by US President, and in that the bilateral partnership between US and India is announced by our Prime Minister regarding technological cooperation as well as, let's say, financial help from developed country to developing countries, US to India. So we are going to understand the significance of this partnership and some discussion here regarding the climate talks. Next, endeavor, leadership and the story of a nation. Context of the article is that we are celebrating 50 years of independence of Bangladesh. Together both Bangladesh and India is celebrating centenary year for, let's say, birth anniversary of the first Prime Minister of Bangladesh, so Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. So we are going to understand how various developments happened in 1971, the Bangladesh Liberation War, and the leadership of Prime Minister at that time Indira Gandhi, and other such, let's say, contributions by, we can say, IB or RAW and other, we can say, armed forces also, right? So this article is talking about remembering all these endeavors and leadership role and those important players in liberation of Bangladesh at that time. Okay, so post independence history is part of syllabus of GS1 paper mains examination. From that aspect we are going to input here. Next, groundwater depletion may reduce winter cropping intensity by 20% in India. So from geography perspective, here we have to understand that reduced irrigation will result into less cropping intensity. Okay, so this aspect we have to consider when we talk about GS1 paper irrigation part, cropping intensity, cropping patterns, along with that the food grain production, GS3 paper also food security. So GS1 paper and GS3 paper we are going to take input here, this one particular study and its outcome. Specifically prelims related development, Justice N.V. Ramanna is now new Chief Justice of India. So again, basics of appointment of CJI in India, how it happens, the procedural aspects, there is repetition but this will be revision for you. Polity perspective. Then old SpaceX capsule delivers new crew to International Space Station, ISS. So from science and technology perspective, these developments, the old SpaceX capsule is now modified to further deliver the new crew to ISS. So we will try to understand from science and technology perspective, space science and space technology. Yes, defying Turkey, US recognize Armenian genocide of 1915. So now this is a very important development in international relations or from miscellaneous aspects also, because it is not relating to India. So however, it is important what happened at that time in Armenia, so in 1915. So that aspect as a general information you need to understand here. Let us go into details of all these articles now. A green partnership. So context of the article, US-India climate and clean energy agenda 2030 partnership between India and US. Okay, climate and clean energy agenda 2030 partnership. This is announced by our Prime Minister during the climate summit or leaders summit on climate recently completed, and it was hosted by US President. So this is good outcome. The article is talking in first part that the coming decade may see sustained financial and technological cooperation between two countries, and it is going to help in reduction of greenhouse gas emissions from India. Now, how it is going to help? With open source technologies from US, India could incorporate innovative material and processes into various economic sectors, for example, industries, transportation sector, or even buildings and power sector, right. So, this is very much going to help India. Technology transfer is very important aspect of climate justice that we talk about in climate negotiations. Climate change crisis originated not in developing countries but in industrialized world, Western developed countries, and that's why we need to understand already these countries have used world's enough carbon space. Now it is time that the remaining carbon space is to be used by developing and underdeveloped countries. Okay. Along with that, providing funding and green technologies as compensation for the emission space earlier done and lost by the poorer countries is a win-win game for both developed countries as well as developing countries or underdeveloped countries. How? Because it is going to help in reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, or it is going to tackle global warming, climate change, and we know that if the global emissions continue at the present rate or the global warming continues and goes beyond 2 degrees Celsius, then various, let's say, extreme events will impact both developed countries as well as developing countries. Okay. So, that is why it is a win-win situation to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Along with that, to developing countries and underdeveloped countries, it is going to help in increase in employment, at the same time reduction in poverty, increase in standard of life. So, this is how we have to understand the win-win situation. Along with that, reduced disasters will help in less number of loss of life in such events like extreme events of cyclones, tropical cyclones, or heat waves, cold waves, right. So, ultimately it is a win-win game. Now, Prime Minister of Britain has announced enhanced ambition at the summit for Britain to cut the carbon emissions by 78% by 2035 over 1990 levels. Now, this is ambitious target. Along with that, he also called for climate funding by rich nations to exceed goal of $100 billion that is there at present. Now, this was decided in 2010 itself that such $100 billion climate finance should be developed, or we can say collected by the rich nations or developed nations. However, we need to exceed this goal. This is the call by British Prime Minister. Now, US President also announced the cuts of emissions by 50 to 52% by 2030 over 2005 levels. Now, again the ambitious target put forward by US President now, and he would have to persuade the industry and research institution at home to share their knowledge to developing countries and subsidize transfer of technologies to these developing countries. Okay. So, under this US-India partnership climate and clean energy agenda, so India is surely going to benefit in terms of finance transfer as well as technological transfers. Fine. So, international relations also, India-US relationship, climate is very important aspect in bilateral relationship. Along with that, GS3 paper, environment section and climate change part, so we can expect such question there also in GS3 paper. So, take input accordingly. Next, endeavor, leadership and story of a nation. So, yes, we are celebrating the golden jubilee of Bangladesh independence and birth centenary of Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, right. So, that is why it is in news. You need to remember that previous year questions in 2013, there was one question in GS1 paper regarding this Bangladesh Liberation War, and after that till now there was no question regarding this particular event in post independence history syllabus of GS1 paper. So this year we can expect question from this particular development in post-independence era, because 50 years of independence and birth centenary of Bangabandhu we are celebrating. So we can expect such question here in GS1 paper 2021 mains examination, right. So what was the question in 2013, that which circumstances, analyze the circumstances that led to this particular Bangladesh liberation war, or we can say independence war of 1971. So these circumstances, yes, we are going to understand now. At the same time, we have to also recognize, acknowledge the role played by different personalities, different institutions in this victory here. Okay, so first aspect is leadership role of Prime Minister at that time, Indira Gandhi. So very, let's say, decisive leadership. At the same time, by having the calculations of, we can say that, pros and cons of the decisions, this decision was taken, a decisive decision we can say that, because there was many such threats from international relations aspect. US was threatening India because of such actions. So all these decisions were taken by the, we can say, the competent leader at that time, and that's why we need to acknowledge the role played by Prime Minister Indira Gandhi at that time. Along with that, 1971 was year of significance for two important events. Along with this, let's say, establishment of new nation Bangladesh and India's contribution to it, also India had extended all out support to government in Sri Lanka to defeat the group named Janata Vimukti Peramuna in the Sri Lanka. Okay, so this is also important help that was extended to government of Sri Lanka at that time, right. So these two important events, we can say that they are important democratic credentials of India, and India can boast at international platforms such, let's say, decisions taken in 1971 to explain or show our democratic credentials at world level. Then a diplomatic victory for India. So this 1971 war, basically it was diplomatic victory. Why? Because at that time not only armed forces action was important, rather diplomatically appropriate maneuvering was very important. And yes, along with Prime Minister, the civil servants, or we can say foreign, those who were in Indian foreign service at that time, these civil servants also helped here in ensuring such victory. Okay, so what happened at that time is, when India was having the pressure situation to intervene in Bangladesh, or we can say eastern Pakistan at that time. Why? Because there was a flux of refugees, influx of refugees, or we can say from eastern Pakistan, and India was not having enough resources to tackle this burden of the refugees, to deal with these refugees. So this was one of such circumstance to intervene in the eastern Pakistan at that time. Along with that, yes, US or Pakistan was ally of US and was part of many such military groupings of Western world, and therefore Pakistan sought help from US, and 7th fleet of US Navy was entering into Bay of Bengal at that time. Okay, and therefore our Prime Minister was forced at that time to make some arrangements with Russia, USSR, to deter the action of US here. So accordingly, friendship treaty was signed with USSR at that time, and to some extent it helped to deter the action of US here in bilateral, let's say, conflict that was going on, right. So that's why we can say that it is a diplomatic victory for India. Yes, acknowledging the role of intelligence agencies, IB and RAW along with armed forces. So up till now we only know about the role played by armed forces, Navy, Army as well as Indian Air Force in, let's say, this victory. However, the role that was played by, let's say, the intelligence agencies like IB and RAW at that time, its agents were working in East Pakistan at that time anonymously, and therefore they were able to, let's say, communicate some critical information to India regarding the movement of, let's say, armed forces of Pakistan in East Pakistan at that time. So this has surely helped our armed forces or, let's say, leaders to take appropriate decisions, and that's why their role was very much critical and need to be acknowledged here. Okay, along with that, Mukti Bahini. Okay, so their role is also important. Mukti Bahini, where, let's say, those young Bangladeshis from eastern Pakistan at that time, they were trained by our armed forces or these intelligence agencies at that time, and they were provided with arms. Later on they helped along with our armed forces in dealing with the Pakistani army, right? So this is how we have to acknowledge their role also. Now we know that the Bangladesh is a shining example of what is possible through human endeavor and a wise leadership. So we know that since its independence, earlier it was underdeveloped countries, but now it is a developing country, and its annual GDP growth now exceeds that of its erstwhile parent, that is Pakistan. This is how, let's say, a newly formed country had its own vision now, and it is, let's say, making strides in that direction, achieving that goal here. Along with that, the women empowerment in the country has surely helped the, let's say, economic sector of the country or economic growth in the country. So this is how we have to understand the human development aspect also. At the same time, India did not, let's say, took credit at international level about, let's say, intervention in the East Pakistan and liberation of, let's say, Bangladesh at that time. Even today also India does not take credit about this action. However, we have to understand that India has played a very important role in the independence of Bangladesh, and surely Bangladesh recognizes this particular intervention or help, right? So GS one paper, post independence history, you need to remember all these aspects. Yes, some, let's say, minute details you need to remember, that what happened one by one event wise. So yes, that is important for understanding what happened actually in 1971. So that is part of your syllabus, but this particular article is talking only about remembering the leadership role, the role played by intelligence agencies. All these aspects are mentioned here in this particular article. Okay, yes. Now, groundwater depletion may reduce winter cropping intensity by 20% in India. So the context of the article here is one study that is done by the scientists here. They are saying that groundwater depletion may reduce winter cropping intensity by 20% in India. Now, winter cropping intensity is largely related to wheat cultivation in northern plains, especially northwestern states. So India is second largest producer of wheat in the world, over 30 million hectares in the country dedicated to producing this crop. So this kind of information is also being asked in prelims examination, like statements whether India is first or second largest producer of wheat. So yes, second largest, but with severe groundwater depletion, the cropping intensity or the amount of land planted in the winter season may be decreasing by up to 20% by 2025. This notes the new paper. some of the important winter crops: wheat, barley, mustard. Also you need to understand the rabi crops or winter crops. Okay, in prelims examination there can be basic question. At the same time, India has three main irrigation types on winter crop areas: dug wells, tube wells and canals. Especially wells or well irrigation is very important in northern plains, we can say, during winter season. And therefore, this is over extraction of groundwater is happening, especially the policy decisions, let's say, yes, the green revolution decision in 1960s to become the self-reliant in food production. So because of such decisions, there was more and more land area brought under the cultivation, and yes, the cropping intensity increased. However, the cropping pattern is wrong. It is not according to, let's say, agroclimatic regions as well as agroecological regions of the country, and because of that, what is happening is over extraction of groundwater is happening, and it is leading to soil degradation and depleting its productivity. So what is the solution provided by the writers here of this study? Adoption of water saving technologies like sprinkler or drip irrigation and maybe switching to less water intensity crops help use limited groundwater resources more effectively. So these three solutions, like those water efficient technologies of irrigation, drip irrigation, sprinkler irrigation, and we need to change the cropping pattern and we need to shift towards water, let's say less water intensive crops in these regions, right. So which are the states which are affected here? Punjab and Haryana. Now these regions are ecologically less suitable for rice cultivation due to predominantly light soils, and because of that the over irrigation is happening. The soils are becoming alkaline and saline in that region, the soil degradation is happening. So that's why wheat and, let's say, rice from that region, there should be change in the cropping pattern from that region. At the same time, this particular situation in Punjab and Haryana led to unsustainable groundwater use for irrigation, in turn groundwater scarcity in region. There was also post-harvest residue burning to make way for timely sowing of wheat. So this has resulted into air pollution issue in Delhi and surrounding region. So that's why there is also, let's say, demand for change in cropping pattern in those particular areas. Along with that, the poor infrastructure in eastern states. Eastern states are actually more suitable for cultivation of rice, and therefore there is need of appropriate infrastructure, irrigation infrastructure and other post harvest infrastructure should be there in eastern states, be it like Odisha, West Bengal, Chhattisgarh. These states there should be increase in or improvement in infrastructure here, right. So there are enough groundwater resources supported with higher monsoon rainfall in eastern Indian states like Bihar and Odisha, but due to lack of enough irrigation infrastructure, farmers are not able to make use of natural resources there. So we need to have some policy, better policy decisions in eastern India to expand irrigation and increase agriculture productivity. This is how we have to take input here: GS1 paper, geography part, agro, let's say economy part from GS3 section, right. So cropping pattern, along with that GS1 geography, irrigation and soil productivity. Fine. Now specifically prelims related developments. Yes, Justice N.V. Ramanna is new CJI, Chief Justice of India. So he is sworn in as new CJI, 48th Chief Justice of India, and the, let's say, oath was administered by President at Rashtrapati Bhavan. This particular, let's say, event happened in Rashtrapati Bhavan. Now Chief Justice of India, there is only one article here which mentions Article 124(1) of Indian Constitution says there shall be Supreme Court of India consisting of Chief Justice of India. There is no, let's say, procedure mentioned about appointment of CJI or let's say qualification criteria or anything. So this is evolved by the judiciary itself now, the appointment procedure. So conventionally, the outgoing Chief Justice of India selects the most senior then sitting Supreme Court judge. Okay, so however, this convention was, let's say, breaked in many such instances, especially in 1970s, and a senior most judge was not appointed as CJI. So that's why in second judge's case 1993, Supreme Court has said that only senior most judge of Supreme Court is to be appointed as Chief Justice of India. Now this is not convention, rather it is now judicial pronouncement. Now it is judicial pronouncement. Now what is the procedure here? Yes, procedure initiated by law minister, union law minister, seeking recommendation of outgoing CJI at appropriate time. Then CJI sends the recommendation to the law ministry. After receiving recommendation from CJI, law minister forward it to prime minister, and then prime minister advises president to, let's say, appoint new CJI. So president administers the oath of office to the new CJI. This is the procedure followed. However, there is a minute difference in appointment of CJI and appointment of, let's say, any judge to Supreme Court. The key difference in appointment of CJI and appointment of Supreme Court judge is that this recommendation which is given, okay, so yes, the government cannot send the recommendation of CJI back to them for reconsideration. While in the case of appointment of Supreme Court judges, the government can do, so let's say, can send the recommendation back to reconsideration, and if collegium reiterates those names, then they have to, let's say, they cannot object any further, they have to appoint that person as Supreme Court judge. This is the only difference in appointment of CJI here. Okay, so the recommendation cannot be sent back in case of CJI. Okay, so there can be question in prelims examination here from polity part. Now, old SpaceX capsule delivers new crew to space station. So recently we also learned about International Space Station in the Hindu analysis. So here now a recycled SpaceX capsule carrying 4 astronauts arrived at International Space Center on Saturday. The Dragon capsule docked autonomously with the orbiting outpost 420 kilometers above the Indian Ocean a day after launching from NASA's Kennedy Space Center. Right. So the new arrivals representing US, France and Japan will spend next 6 months at space station. Okay, so it was for the first time 2 SpaceX Crew Dragons were parked there at the same time, practically side by side in this, let's say, International Space Station. Right. So the private sector in US, especially this SpaceX of Elon Musk, is very much actively participating in the space exploration, space science, space technology. Okay, so this as a follow-up to science and technology, space science, space technology part, you need to remember these things. Next. Yes, defying Turkey, US recognizes Armenian genocide of 1915. What happened in 1915 is, let's say, almost about 1.5 million Armenians are estimated to have been killed from 1915 to 1917 during waning days of Ottoman Empire. So waning days of Ottoman Empire because Ottoman Empire was, let's say, declining at that time as loss of World War I. Ottoman Empire was losing at that time, right? So because of that, yes, many such killing happened in Armenia. Also you need to remember that this Armenia country was recently in news because of Nagorno-Karabakh region, right? So this region is having conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Okay, so Armenia and Azerbaijan. So earlier in the Hindu analysis we also looked into this. Along with that, the Caucasus Mountains, they run through Armenia and Azerbaijan. So you need to remember them also, geography aspect. Okay, now US for the first time, okay, US president recognized the 1915 killings of Armenians by Ottoman forces as genocide, a watershed moment for descendants of hundreds of thousands of dead, as he defied decades of pressure by the Turkey. Okay, so Mr. Biden became the first US president to use the word genocide in the customary statement on anniversary, a day after informing Turkish President Recep, so that he would go ahead with this step. Okay, so yes, we know that earlier there were good relations of between Turkey and US, earlier US president, but now to some extent this is going to make problem between the relationship Turkey and US. Okay, so this is for the first time the US president used word genocide in customary statement. This is also important, let's say, development. So Armenia, again you go into let's say atlas, look at the political as well as physical features, look at this Caucasus Mountains, Nagorno-Karabakh region. It was in news last year, Armenia and Azerbaijan conflict, then the peace brokered by Russia. Okay, yes. Now the COVID-19 related developments in the country, various decisions of the government and all these things related to COVID-19. For example, government has decided to exempt basic custom duty on import of COVID-19 vaccines and basic customs duty and health cess on import of medical grade oxygen and other equipments related to providing oxygens to patients for a period of 3 months. So exemptions of customs duty for vaccines and medical grade oxygen import. Okay, then Delhi High Court warned that it will not hesitate to hang anyone who is found obstructing oxygen supplies. A very harsh, let's say, ruling, but yes, surely life of people was at stake, and that's why such statement was used by Delhi High Court. Invoking Disaster Management Act, the center ordered states, this Disaster Management Act 2005, center ordered states that all liquid oxygen including the existing stock with the private plants or industries should be made available to the government and will be used for medical purposes only. Okay, now this is the emergency provision invoked under Disaster Management Act. Along with that, now looking at the chaos created over oxygen shortage in Delhi and other states, Odisha government has decided to tag vehicles carrying the cylinders with GPS system so that they can track these, let's say, tankers, oxygen tankers and vehicles from source points to hospitals. This is good thing. Again, Bharat Biotech, maker of indigenously developed Covaxin, has set the price of rupees 600 per dose for state governments and private hospitals, rupees 1200 per dose. Now this is much higher as compared to Covishield price that was announced by Serum Institute of India earlier. Yes, PM Care Fund has approved the allocation of funds for setting up of 551 pressure swing absorption medical oxygen generation plants at public health facilities across the country. The aim is to set up oxygen plant in all districts with government hospitals. This is a very good development, but surely its implementation should be at faster rate now. Okay, so at each district hospitals there will be such oxygen generation plants will be made available, and the funding will be there through PM Cares Fund. Okay. Now, international help to deal with COVID-19 pandemic. In last 2 days, many countries agreed to help India. Like for example, 4 cryogenic oxygen tanks were airlifted by Air India Indian Air Force from Singapore. Saudi Arabia also agreed to send liquid oxygen, 80 million tons of liquid oxygen to India. Along with that, US will immediately deploy supplies and other assistance to India. So US assistance will include making raw materials for COVID-19 vaccine Covishield immediately accessible. So this is good development. Along with that, Russia is also planning to fly special planes to India with wide range of COVID-19 related assistance, including oxygen generators, concentrators and medicines. Okay, Russia, US, Singapore and Saudi Arabia. So other countries like UAE, UK, they have also agreed to help India. So the help is pouring into India. Earlier India helped many other countries. Now other countries are helping India. This is good thing. So from vaccine diplomacy or international collaborations. Okay, so these were important developments in last 2 days. For further information on editorial discussion classes or ED classes, wherein in-depth analysis of mains related issues and articles is done by Ansari Sir and team, you can contact LUKMAAN IAS. Thank you.